Ned's expression softened. The crown does not make the king. Robert was once just a soldier in many ways, and if this helps you understand, no one is asking you to rule today. You're a boy, Gendry. If the realm accepts your claim, you will need good counsel, loyal men, and a measure of readiness. But for now, we must keep you alive. Understand? Gendry nodded, though his expression remained troubled. I understand that bit well enough. The Lannisters want me dead. And not just them, Ned admitted. There are others who may want to see you disposed of. We head north to Winterfell, where my bannermen can protect us. From there, we'll see about calling the great lords to recognize you. And if the realm is wise, if the truth holds power, then we may avoid a war. At that, Gendry huffed a hollow laugh. A war, like the ones King Robert fought, I guess. He rubbed his arm, a gesture that reminded Ned of how unprepared the boy was for such burdens. Try to rest, Ned said, placing a hand on Gendry's shoulder briefly, hoping to convey some measure of reassurance. We leave at first light. They rode for days. Rumors drifted in the wind like crows. Rumors that Joffrey had taken the throne, that Cersei was issuing proclamations in his name. Rumors that Eddard Stark had betrayed the crown, that he was a traitor who had kidnapped the king's betrothed and fled north. The largest rumor of all, that Stannis had declared himself rightful heir and was mustering men on Dragonstone. They heard nothing of Renly yet, only that he had left the city in secret the night Robert died. The entire kingdom was on a knife's edge. Ned expected pursuit. Indeed, more than once they spied riders in the distance, but either the riders were not Lannister men, or they had no orders to engage. At one point, a small band of Sellswords threatened them on the road, but Syrio Farrell and the northern guards made short work of those brigands, leaving their bodies for the crows. Sansa wept at the sight of blood, but Arya observed it all with stark eyes. Gendry looked away, troubled by the violence. When they reached the Crossroads Inn, they found that the road north was clogged with refugees. War had not yet broken out, but small folk could smell the threat, and many decided to leave for safer regions. The talk around the inn was grim. The Lannisters, they said, were gathering forces in the west. The Riverlands prepared for trouble. Men across the realm were picking sides or fleeing them. Ned kept his hood low, recognizing that his face was well known. They took refuge in a small private room. Over a sparse meal of bread and stew, Ned laid out his plan to the loyal knights. We press on north to Winterfell. Once there, I will have the banners called. The north shall stand behind us. With the king's decree naming Gendry as Robert's heir, we'll have a legitimate cause. But Stannis will likewise have a claim. He is Robert's elder brother, after all. We must treat with him. If Stannis sees the decree, if it is done under the Great Seal, perhaps he'll recognize Gendry as Robert's express choice. One of the knights cleared his throat. My lord, do you truly think Lord Stannis will accept a bastard over himself? Ned looked away, tension in his jaw. If it comes down to the line of succession, then by law Stannis would be next in line. I do not dispute that, but Robert's last wish, recorded here in writing, is for Gendry to claim the throne. Stannis is an honorable man, but also a stubborn one. He may not yield easily. Yet if I can appeal to his sense of duty to the realm, perhaps to the memory of Jon Arryn, he may see reason. The realm needs stability, not a wave of bloodshed. Another knight chimed in. And what of Lord Renly? He is rumored to gather men in the south, too. Ned sighed. Renly is more impulsive. He might sense an opportunity if the realm is in flux. I know he's popular, charming. Some might wish to see him crowned rather than Stannis or a bastard boy no one has heard of. All eyes drifted to Gendry, who had been silent, his meal barely touched. He looked up, meeting their stares with self-consciousness. I'm not asking for it, he said plainly. But the king, if he truly said so. Ned nodded, placing a hand on the parchment concealed beneath his tunic. He did. And as the king's hand, as your father's old friend, I must honor his last command. War may be inevitable, but I'll do my best to spare the realm the worst of it. They continued northward, trying to keep to lesser-known roads to avoid confrontation. Before they reached the neck, they received word that Lord Tywin Lannister had marched out of the west with a large host, presumably aiming at the Riverlands. Rumors said that Tywin's son, Jaime the Kingslayer, was also in the field. King's Landing was under the effective rule of the Queen Regent, Cersei, with Joffrey enthroned. The city watch was firmly in Lannister hands. It was a heavy blow to hear that the small council had declared Ned Stark a traitor, awarding a bounty to anyone who handed him over. Sansa, hearing this, wrung her hands. "I never meant to be a traitor," she said tearfully. "I only wanted to be a queen someday." Arya glared at the mention of Joffrey, her lip curling. At Moat Cailin, they paused to catch their breath, for they were now in the North's domain. The crumbling fortress guarded the causeway that was nearly impassable. Ned knew that if the Lannisters tried to follow them with a large host, they'd be vulnerable here. He left a small garrison of loyal men to hold Moat Cailin. Then, at last, they continued onward. The air grew cooler, the scent of pine and damp earth replacing the southern dust. Gendry, unaccustomed to the north, shivered in the chill, but forced a brave face. It was nearly a month after Robert's death when they finally glimpsed the towers of Winterfell rising in the distance, a comforting sight for Ned. Yet his heart was heavy, remembering how he had left the north for King's Landing not so long ago. So much had changed in that short span, so many illusions shattered. Robb Stark, Ned's oldest son, was there to greet them in the courtyard, surrounded by the household guard. His direwolf, Grey Wind, prowled at his side. Robb's face lit with relief when he saw his father alive, and Sansa and Arya safe. Yet he was not a boy anymore, at least not entirely. He had grown in confidence, in composure, having held Winterfell in his father's absence. There was worry etched into Robb's features as well. The news from the south was dire, and rumor had preceded them that Ned Stark was an outlaw. Ned dismounted, embracing his son in front of the gathered household. Sansa hugged Robb fiercely, weeping. Arya clung to him only for a moment before turning to pat Grey Wind with a grin that was both relieved and defiant. Gendry lingered at the edge of the gathering, uncertain where he fit among these northern lords. Robb bowed respectfully to Ned. "Father, I'm glad you've returned safely. We've had word that the Lannisters, that there may be war." Ned grimaced. "There may indeed be war, but we must be calm, and we must be just." He looked around at those assembled, the master-at-arms, the stewards, the guardsmen, all looking to him for leadership. He stepped aside, motioning Gendry forward. "Here stands Gendry Baratheon, recognized by the late King Robert as his trueborn son in a royal decree. Gendry, this is Robb Stark, my heir." A wave of surprise rippled through the courtyard. Robb blinked, uncertain how to greet the black-haired youth before him, who had the look of the common folk but carried a royal name. Gendry managed an awkward bow of sorts, not sure if that was what was expected. "We shall speak in the great hall," Ned said. "My lords, we have much to discuss." In the great hall, warmed by blazing hearths, they gathered around the high table. Catelyn Stark had hurried in, relief mingling with concern as she embraced her husband and daughters. Once the initial greetings were done, Ned quietly explained the situation to her and Robb. King Robert's dying wish, Joffrey's false claim, and the certain hostility from the Lannisters. Catelyn's mouth formed a thin, worried line. "And Stannis?" she asked. "He will see Gendry's claim as an affront to his own rights. Surely he will not stand aside." Ned nodded heavily. "No, he will not. But we cannot yield Robert's own last command either. The realm would not forgive me if I stood by and let Cersei place a false king on the throne. If we can reach Stannis, perhaps we can broker some accord, or at least hold off open war until a great council can be called. But first, we must secure ourselves. Tywin Lannister is in the field, and if he marches north, we must be ready." Robb took a deep breath. "Then we call the banners?" Ned met his son's gaze. He remembered how Robb was still barely more than a boy in some ways, but the North needed to unite under a single cause. "Yes," he said, "we call the banners." We must also send ravens to the Vale, to the Riverlands. I have friends there. If they still trust me, we may gather a host large enough to discourage the Lannisters from pressing an attack." He turned to Gendry, who had been standing by the hearth, listening intently, his face lit by the flicker of flames. "Your Grace," Ned began, but Gendry started and shook his head. "Don't call me that," the boy said hoarsely. "I'm not." Ned allowed himself a thin smile. "You are, whether you like it or not. But if it makes you more comfortable, I'll refrain from using the title until it's recognized by more than my word. Know this, you are under the protection of House Stark. No harm will come to you so long as I draw breath." Robb nodded in firm agreement, though he seemed uneasy about how a bastard son could be recognized so suddenly. Catelyn's expression remained guarded, but she said nothing in open dissent. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of preparations. Ravens were sent to every corner of the north, commanding bannermen to gather at Winterfell. Warriors began to arrive. Karstarks, Glovers, Mormonts, Serwins, Tallhearts, and more, each marching under their respective banners, pledging their loyalty to House Stark. Whispers ran through their ranks about the rumored heir, the boy claiming to be a Baratheon. Yet they trusted Ned Stark's honor. If Ned Stark claimed this boy was recognized by King Robert, then that was enough for them to take heed. Gendry tried to remain unnoticed, often found down in the Winterfell forges, working a hammer at the anvil, as if trying to cling to something familiar. Yet the smith there, Mikken, nearly tripped over himself at the notion that a king's son was laboring beside him. Gendry insisted he wanted no special treatment, but the entire household regarded him with a mixture of awe and puzzlement. Sansa watched him with cautious eyes, occasionally asking if he missed King's Landing, if he was frightened. Arya, on the other hand, found him intriguing, especially once she learned he had grown up poor in Flea Bottom. She pestered him with questions until he barked at her to leave him be, which only made Arya smirk. Meanwhile, news trickled in from the south. Stannis had apparently declared himself king of Westeros, citing Joffrey's bastardy, and calling upon the realm to follow the line of succession. At the same time, Renly had claimed the throne as well, with the backing of the powerful Tyrells from Highgarden. 3 kings now contended for the Iron Throne, for, if one counted Joffrey, a storm of chaos gripped the realm. In this swirl of confusion, Ned recognized a sliver of hope. If both Stannis and Renly were locked in competition, it might make it more plausible to present Gendry as Robert's express heir. Yet it could also mean more enemies on the field. War seemed inevitable. The realm was fracturing along lines of loyalty, ambition, and grudges. The only question was where the first swords would cross. Word came that Tywin Lannister had moved against the Riverlands, sacking villages and burning crops, presumably as a challenge to House Tully, Ned's in-laws. This forced Ned's hand. He could not allow the Lannisters to ravage the Riverlands unchallenged. He mustered the northern host at Winterfell, thousands of men, all sworn to House Stark. Robb helped organize them with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Catelyn, refusing to be left behind, prepared to ride south as well. Ned tried to persuade her otherwise, but she was determined. She had Tully blood, and the Riverlands were threatened. Before they departed, Ned had a private conversation with Gendry in the